The UFC pay-per-view model is officially coming to an end. Yes, you heard that correct. There will no longer be UFC pay-per-views. This is massive. So UFC has signed a brand new deal with Paramount Plus. 7 years, $7.7 billion. $7.7 billion. So all UFC events will now take place on Paramount Plus instead of ESPN and ESPN Plus. What this means is instead of paying $80 for every single UFC pay-per-view, we will now be able to pay $12.99 a month roughly and get everything UFC. Everything. I never thought the day would come that pay-per-views no longer exist. This doesn't even feel real. Dana White had this to say after the news broke that the deal was signed. This historic deal with Paramount and CBS is incredible for UFC fans and our athletes. For the first time ever, fans in the US will have access to all UFC content without a pay-per-view model, making it more affordable and accessible to view the greatest fights on a massive platform. This deal puts UFC amongst the biggest sports in the world, which is true. This is now going to open up the UFC to like a whole new audience, because UFC is a pretty niche sport already, and having to pay $80 to watch the biggest fighters, that's just not something that's going to work in today's world. So UFC said, forget it, man. It's over with. We're now moving to no pay-per-views. That's massive. That's massive. Now, before we get into any details and start kind of asking some questions about this, let's make it clear that this does not begin until 2026. So I'm pretty sure the first UFC event that will be on Paramount is going to be UFC 324. And I think that'll be in January. So we still have a couple months where it's going to be pay-per-view. Obviously, UFC 319 this weekend is still going to be pay-per-view, but it's coming to an end very, very soon. Now, let's talk about this. The price. Again, right now in the current format, we are paying $80 a month to watch pay-per-views. That's 12 pay-per-views a year, that's basically $1,000. Instead of that, we're going to get I'm pretty sure you're going to have the $12.99 version of Paramount. If you can have the $8 version, that's even better. And obviously, this puts an end to the need to illegally stream. No matter what the UFC does, there's going to be people out there who are going to legally stream the fights under any circumstances. But this will take a massive chunk out of that, because now you just have to have a subscription like Netflix, like HBO, and those kind of apps. So now that's going to be there, and it's going to have all the UFC events. $12.99 instead of, so I don't know what, $200 a month maybe, max, instead of paying almost $1,000 if you bought every single pay-per-view. If you bought every single pay-per-view. Nobody bought every single pay-per-view. So this is massive. Again, this is massive. But with this, it brings up a lot of questions. First one being, how many UFC events are we going to get? Is the UFC going to take this as an opportunity to kind of cut back on events and be lackluster? I've seen people posting on Twitter already saying now the UFC has no reason to try to have good events, which I disagree with, but I can see where somebody would come from and they'd be like, hey, now that they don't need the pay-per-view sales, why would they give us great events every weekend? But they still need a good gate. And this kind of goes along with some of the fighter pay. I'm not sure how that's going to work, and we'll kind of get into that. Let's start off with how many events is the UFC going to have? Championship Rounds put this out, and I believe it's official. Don't quote me on it, but I love the sound of this. 43 UFC events per year, 13 numbered, and 30 fight nights. That is massive. And I like the fact that it's locked in and it's now open to us how many different events are going to be put on each year. And again, I don't agree with the fact that the UFC is going to take this and kind of lower the quality because they don't need the pay-per-view sales. I see why it could be a concern, but I don't imagine them taking that route. Because at the end of the day, they still need big gates. They still need to promote and grow. This isn't like UFC reaching its peak by any means. A $7.7 billion deal is crazy, so I don't know if obviously it could get bigger, but I doubt it gets a whole lot bigger. But I don't see this as an opportunity, and Dana has never been the one to kind of settle and stop trying to grow the sport. Now, please get out of the apex. Get out of the apex. Paramount. if you're listening, Paramount, don't let them do this to us. I'm tired of the Vegas Apex with no crowd. It's silent, little octagon. It doesn't make any sense. Let's get rid of that. I do want to take a second and talk about the fighter pay. So obviously, you may or may not know, it's pretty well known now that the fighters, most of the top fighters get paid with kind of pay-per-view points, which basically just means they get paid based on how well the pay-per-view does. It would, like, for example, every pay-per-view buy, Volkanovski would get $1 per buy or something along those lines. I'm sure that's not the exact numbers, but that's kind of how it works, to my understanding. Now that the pay-per-views are no longer a thing, I don't know what this is actually going to look like. It'll be interesting to see. This should lead to the fighters getting paid more. Obviously, the UFC is going to miss out on those pay-per-view buys, but again, that was a dying model, a dying breed. Nobody's trying to pay for pay-per-views. I mean, that's like, what are you doing that for now? Boxing and like buying movies? Outside of that, the pay-per-view like model really doesn't exist anymore. So I'm curious to see what the UFC does with how much these guys get paid and how, if anything, gets restructured for those top fighters. Because I'm sure, like John Jones, for example, makes a lot of money based on pay-per-view sales. So guys at that level who are making a significant amount of money from it, how are they going to be kind of adjusted? Everybody complains about the way fighters get paid, so hopefully this means the fighters will get paid a little more and everybody's better off. The real story here is the fact that this is the end of illegal streaming, man. I don't need StreamEast anymore, or what? You know what I mean. I'm not going to get into the weeds. We don't need those anymore. Not me personally, Dana. Not me. I take that back. But we don't need that anymore. I mean, it's $12 a month. If you can't pay $12 a month to watch UFC, you're not really a UFC fan. That's just the fact of the matter. So again, this is massive. This is massive for the fans, for the fighters, and obviously for the UFC. This is just a big deal. Dana White, in case anybody was wondering what he's up to, this was his Instagram post after securing the deal. Dana White posted, this dude is a businessman, okay? Say what you want about him. He has a rough past, and sometimes he doesn't care, it feels like, about the product. But this dude is a mastermind. Power Slap is the biggest thing we've ever seen, ever, okay? And I'm starting to believe this guy. $7.7 billion deal. That doesn't even sound real. 7 years, $1 billion a year. Again, as a reminder, the last deal was like roughly $1 billion for 7 years with ESPN. Now they're getting $1 billion per year. That's crazy. The UFC is growing like crazy, and this deal is only going to help it grow more. If you have enjoyed this video, bro, please like and subscribe. First video on the channel. Let's grow this thing, man. Let's go!